When we talk off camera, you've told me how important and how immensely difficult, technologically speaking,
Yes.
it is to develop your own fighter jet engine, because of which you only have a chosen few countries in the world
Yes.
who have that technology. That year, India has a rocket to send a rover to the moon. India has the BrahMos cruise missile, which also has some sort of a basically jet propulsion system, the ramjet technology.
Yes.
You've mastered that, and you said it's not that simple. But Sandeep, I want you to make it that simple. What is it about a fighter jet engine, that is so difficult to master? The technical aspect of it,
Yeah.
and tell me, as a person who understands not even my car engine, but I want to understand.
Engine is very different from a fighter jet engine. A rocket engine, if you look at it, it's a one-way mission. Whereas a jet engine has to be completely reliable. It has to fire at all times. It has to give you a life of 5,000-6,000 hours, and all of it has to happen perfectly the way it's been designed. So, which is why it's almost like I would call it something like jewelry making. It's such a precise science. It's like Swiss watchmaking. Something as critical as fighter jet engines, and there is no option for you but to do it yourself. And you have to fail. You have to fail repeatedly, and then you finally, master that art. And that is the only way to do it. One reason why the countries that have developed this incredibly complex technology are unlikely to part with that. Even our best friends, the Russians, have not given us this capability. All we do is we assemble these jet engines. We've been doing it for 2 decades in Koraput in Odisha for the Su-30, but we don't have the capability to do it ourselves.
Fund Kaveri Engine. That was quite a hashtag that was a top trend on social media this week. It was a clarion call, seeking the revival of a long-shelved project for India to build its own fighter jet engine. The project took off around, I think, in the late 80s or 90s, if I'm not wrong. But I want to go into the details of this project, what this engine was meant to be, why it never saw light of day. And for that, I have Sandeep Unnithan. Hey, Sandeep. Hi, how are you?
Hi, Dave. Good to be back.
So, Sandeep, this was quite the trend. The trend comes in the aftermath of Operation Sindoor, where we've seen a lot of Make in India weaponry, sort of like, really getting battle tested and proving itself to be quite successful in the fight against Pakistan. And it also comes against the backdrop of what we've seen with the Tejas Mark 1A, which has been delayed because of the supplies of engines that have been delayed by a US vendor. So that makes it quite obvious why having your own fighter jet engine is very, very important. That allows you that freedom to then develop your own fighter jets, like you have with the Mark 1A, except it does not have your own engine. But I don't know much about this engine because I think the project took off even before I was born. So we know the word Kaveri, and we know that it was long shelved. But what was this project? Why was it shelved? And what's its history?
Absolutely. Well, Dave, the Kaveri was meant to power the light combat aircraft, and it was to be India's first indigenously designed, developed, and manufactured jet engine. Now, it's very critical because in the past, we have seen Indian fighter aircraft projects fail because we didn't have an effective jet engine. Now, the Marut, the Hindustan Fighter 24, which was designed and developed with Kurt Tank, who's a very famous German aircraft designer from the Second World War. He designed the Marut for us, but unfortunately, we didn't have a high-powered jet engine for that project. And that is one reason that project failed, because the Air Force felt that it didn't have the required thrust. It couldn't carry the kind of weapons that the Air Force wanted. That's why the aircraft project was shelved. And now you come back to 1983 when India began the light combat aircraft project to develop a light jet fighter that would replace all of its MiG-21s eventually in the late 90s and early 2000s. Now, the Kaveri engine, extremely ambitious program that would catapult us into a very small group of countries that had its own jet engines. We were entirely dependent on the Russians for jet engines for all the domestically manufactured aircraft. And we decided to have our own engine for the light combat aircraft. Now, the project began in about 86 actually to be precise. The LCA began in 83. The Kaveri jet engine began in about 1986. But by 2008, that's just about 12 years later, they discovered that they could not give it the kind of thrust that's almost 80 kilonewtons of thrust that would make it an effective fighter jet engine to power the LCA and allow it to carry all the ordnance and the payloads that the LCA was designed to carry. It was underpowered. So, which is why they decided to go in for the GE 404 engine. That's how the American
US
engine came into the project. And then again, they said, look, let us give it only for the Mark 1, possibly for the Mark 2, you could have the Kaveri engine. So that continued for a few more years. So, but by 2014, they realized that we'd reached a dead end as far as development of the Kaveri went. And they decided to go for the 414 to power the second batch of light combat aircraft. But that having been said, there is still hope for the Kaveri. Even an underpowered Kaveri engine in the form that it exists today, in about 49 or kilonewtons or thereabouts, a dry thrust engine, which doesn't have the afterburner part, that could power the Ghatak unmanned combat aerial vehicle.
Yes.
So you're looking at this Kaveri getting a new lease of life for unmanned aircraft. So that's a very significant program, and the engine is being tested in the Russian Federation even as we speak.
Yeah.
So there's hope for the Kaveri even now.
Yeah. Second point then, when we talk off camera, you've told me how important and how immensely difficult, technologically speaking, it is to develop your own fighter jet engine, because of which you only have a chosen few countries in the world who have that technology. And it's seen as that holy grail when it comes to aviation, because if you have a jet engine, forget just fighter jets, you can also develop a very big ecosystem of aviation in your country if you have mastered the art of a turbofan jet engine. And in that context of camera, I also said something that you said was quite silly, that India has a rocket to send a rover to the moon. India has the BrahMos cruise missile, which also has some sort of a basically jet propulsion system, the ramjet technology.
Yes.
You've mastered that, and you said it's not that simple. But Sandeep, I want you to make it that simple. What is it about a fighter jet engine, that is so difficult to master? The technical aspect of it, and tell me, as a person who understands not even my car engine, but I want to understand this.
Well, fighter jet engines are the pinnacle of design when it comes to military technology. I mean, there are very few items out there that are as critical. That's actually a synergy of so many things. It's not just about the metallurgy, but it's the design, it's the tolerance to high temperatures, it's the weight. All of those things come together. Nuclear reactors is one. Compact nuclear reactors is one of those areas that we've talked about, how complex it is. Now, we always chide ourselves saying that, we've launched rockets to the moon and to the Mars, and we've sent rovers up there. But why is it that we can't develop a simple rocket engine? The fact is that a rocket engine is very different from a fighter jet engine. A rocket engine, if you look at it, it's a one-way mission, right? It fires, it launches a spacecraft into orbit, or it launches a rover to the Mars or to the moon. There's no reuse for that rocket. It's expended. Once a rocket is expended, it's gone. And there have been misfires. Whereas a jet engine has to be completely reliable. It has to fire at all times. It has to give you a life of 5,000-6,000 hours. And all of it has to happen perfectly the way it's been designed. So which is why it's almost like, I would call it something like jewelry making. It's such a precise science. It's like Swiss watchmaking. Every little component has to fit in. It has to be light. It has to be durable. It has to be strong. It has to be resilient. So every time you switch on the fighter jet engine, it cannot not punch, your thrust that would take your fighter up. Otherwise, you're dead, right? So it has to function at all times and in all of the conditions that you prescribe it to. And that is the reason, Dave, that so few countries have been able to develop this technology. The precise thrust, the precise weight, the precise thrust to weight ratio, all of those things. It's a very, very complicated thing. And, technology like single crystal blade technology, all of these things come together to form this engine. And that is one reason why the countries that have developed this incredibly complex technology are unlikely to part with that. Even our best friends, the Russians, have not given us this capability. All we do is we assemble these jet engines. We've been doing it for 2 decades in Koraput in Odisha for the Su-30, but we don't have the capability to do it ourselves. So even recently, you must have seen the report of us buying over 200 AL-31FP engines for the Su-30, and you would have been wondering that we've been doing this for 20 years. Surely by now we could have got the know-why of this, right? So the thing is that there's a subtle difference between the know-how and the know-why, right? They will give you the know-how, which is to assemble an engine. They'll give you all the components, but they will never give you the know-why, which is the real stuff, which is why does that blade have to be in that shape,
right?
Or why does it have to move in this particular axis, or why is it, what is the composition of the metal, for instance? These are all trade secrets no country parts with, and that is why when this thing of transfer of technology with GE came up, they said that we are going to help you build your own jet engine. We were laughing because we know that the Americans never part with any technology, least of all something as critical as fighter jet engines. And there is no option for you but to do it yourself. And you have to fail repeatedly, and then you finally, master that art. And that is the only way to do it. And the last country to have done that were the Chinese. Now, the Chinese, we always make a virtue of the fact that they are a manufacturing superpower, and they've been manufacturing very competently for the last 2 or 3 decades. It took the Chinese decades to master a jet engine, which is now powering their first fighters. And even there, they're not very entirely confident of that, which is why they're still dependent on the Russians for fighter jet engines. So it's literally crown jewels, which no country are going to part with. And you have no option but to do it by yourself.
Right. Because what you're saying is, instead of fund Kaveri Engine, we should be saying, let's come together and build the Kaveri Engine. Thanks, Sandeep. Great chat as always.
Great.
Thank you.